without sight. Connect, collaborate, and create.
Hello, and welcome to the Sound Without Sight podcast. This bonus episode features an interview with young composer and performer Precious Akindele. Precious shares her experiences of studying at the prestigious BRIT School in the UK, as well as tips for succeeding in the application and audition process. We hope this episode will be especially valuable for young musicians who are considering studying music at college and beyond.
Hello, so my name's Precious and I'm 17 years old and I'm studying music at the BRIT School. So I'm a pianist and I've been playing piano for about 9 years now. Also love singing. I play guitar, steel pans and organ. And I've also been having composition lessons for about 4 years now. Really interested in classical contemporary composition. I've been a part of Tomorrow's Warriors for about 3 years now. And I just love everything to do with jazz, to do with jamming, popular music, but as well classical music and music creation, especially like music creation with mixed media, so like dance and classical music, art and classical music and soundscape. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Loads of good stuff there, like really, really interesting background and interests. So I think we're going to take just a little bit of time now to explore your pathway into the BRIT School. So we talk a little bit about the process of applying and auditioning, and now that you're there, how it's been advocating for your access requirements and the process of getting those in place. Does that sound all right?
Sounds sick.
Awesome. All right. Well, I guess if we kind of rewind and go back to the application process first for BRIT, what's kind of required for an application?
So essentially, you just have to fill in a form for like your first application, detailing your musical training and experience, and basically explaining why you'd be a good fit for BRIT. So a lot of that sort of contains talking about, your characteristics and like your core values and what you care about. So the BRIT School, they have like core values, which basically creativity, inclusion, kindness, perseverance, confidence, stuff like that. And you have to sort of have an anecdote to explain times that you've showed that in terms of your musical experience.
Awesome. Awesome. Maybe we'll come back to that in a bit more detail later. But I guess aside from those values, what musical experience do they expect?
So I'd say it varies depending on your instrument. So I'd say that in terms of singers, they usually tend to have a lot less exams or grades or stuff like that, just because of that's the nature of singing, especially singing popular music. But in terms of like my case, so I've been playing piano for like then 8 years. I've been having like 2 private lessons a week for that 8 years. I'd also been part of 5 other musical groups as well. So I would have those 2 music lessons and then attend 5 other musical classes, like a lot of them being group classes. So, for example, one of those was jazz. And so then I had like quite a lot of experience, like performing in little bands, gigs and stuff, but also like semi-professional performing. And like I'd been doing musical theatre for about like 8 years prior. So I had all of that performing experience. And I also did dance for about 7 years. So I was like very comfortable on stage. I was also in 2 choirs for a couple of years as well. I'd been playing an organ for a year at that point, and I'd been having composition lessons for 4 years. So since I was 12, I've been having composition lessons every week. And I also participated in lots of like music outreach programs as well as like music creation, like what I was talking about before with this like mixed media sort of stuff. So it is like the more stuff that you have, the better it is. And I'm telling you, like in that sort of last 6 months run up to BRIT applications, I was doing anything and everything I could do to just have opportunities that I could talk about. And there'd be times when I did this one thing that was really, really stressful, kind of last minute singing thing. And I was like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. And
Mm.
my mom was like, think about the application. Think about, and that's like what I was thinking in my mind. I was like, I've just got to think about that. And so I think that like having that sort of like, I will take any opportunity. And that's actually what the teacher said to me in my interview. They said, I love your energy and I love that you take every single opportunity. And it's like, that is such an important like Brit value.
Yeah, absolutely. And were there any of the other values, so not quite so musically focused, like were there other things from other areas of your life that you could use as a kind of anecdote or evidence for some of the other values?
Well, I had been a scout since I was 6 years old. So I had done like Beavers, Cubs, Scouts, Explorers, been doing it the whole way through. And I'd also been doing volunteering for Scouts in the younger sections for about like 4 years when I applied. And then I also done DOV. So I had all of that to talk about in terms of kindness and caring about other people, and especially inclusion. Because like in my specific scout group, we tended to have quite a lot of young children because I was doing the younger sections, so like 6 to 8 year olds with extra needs. And I actually did like really engage with the training that I got from the other staff and stuff like that in terms of thinking about how we can make activities more enjoyable for them and how we can like manage because sometimes they get stressed out and stuff like that. And so I did talk about that quite a lot. Also, I could talk about my own personal experiences, like in terms of like perseverance, because not all mainstream musical spaces are inclusive for someone with a visual impairment. So I had a lot to talk about in that sense. And I would say, like, overall, with the values, it's just about being a good person, a kind person, and being creative. And like, when they're saying about creativity, like, you might think, oh, like, I don't write songs, or oh, I don't do this, I don't do that. But it's not even like that. It's like, even how you engage with how you're listening to your music. So I talked about people that I listen to, and it's so important. I feel like people overlook it sometimes, but if you can show passion about the artist that you're listening to, that shows how creative you are, how much you're thinking about your music.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, totally agree. And I guess on the point of inclusion, how did you find the application process? Do you think your visual impairment impacted it at all?
So, to be honest, I actually found the application process really stressful. I think that it hits young people a really hard time because it's literally only a couple months before your GCSEs. So, it's quite intense. Luckily,
Mhm.
BRIT does not really care about the grades that you get in your GCSEs. So, as long as you're getting good grades in music, you don't need to worry about that. So, that's at least like a weight off your shoulder. I think that in terms of visually, it's a very long form. You've got to have evidence. There's a lot of writing. There's just so much you have to write. So I think that, having like a parent, teacher, carer to be there to support you and help you with that is super important. Now, if
Mhm.
you don't, just make sure that you're doing it slowly, you're giving yourself breaks because you can save it and like come back to it later, which is what me and my mum did. So I'll be honest, like my mum did fill in most of the application form for me just because it would have been too exhausting on my eyes for me to fill it in. But we did have lots of discussions about what I was putting, like what was coming across. And I'd like sort of spoke everything and she like just typed it out for me. But I just think like it's really difficult. And so I had a friend, for example, also visually impaired, and she really struggled with the form and actually ended up didn't apply because it was just too much. And I think that that's the hard thing. You've really got to have someone there, unless you feel like you can do it like really incrementally and give yourself time. You've really got to have someone there supporting you.
That's, yeah, really interesting. And I guess just as a bit of a shameless plug, if anyone feels like they do need more support, then RNIB's music team and also, us here at Sound Without Sight, I'm sure the community would love to provide that support or any advice around those kinds of things. I guess with BRIT specifically, how did it compare to other music application processes that you've been part of?
So I'd say it's like it's a lot more intense, but it's also so much more positive. So I feel like with Brit, like in terms of music colleges you can attend at this age, it is the best one. So the state, like the pressure's up there, like the pressure is really up. But also it's so positive and they are so lovely. Once you get like what I feel like is you have to jump the hurdles, but once you do it, you get allowed into this beautiful environment. But while you're jumping it, you're not in the environment and they don't care. Like, so that is definitely how I feel. And like obviously with the forms being long, it's exhausting. And I feel like it does deter people away, which is such a shame. But I feel like part of it is they know that as well. And that's kind of part of it, like of the point. But yeah, like although the form was really long, it does have like a big section about additional needs and stuff like that. So like it really does encourage you to open up about it. And because there's so much information in the form like that they require from you about it, that it is so useful. And you actually can send them in your ECHP during the application process as well, which I think is really great. Instead of having to have a conversation about it, like kind of after the application process and sort of during the audition, because that's what I've heard with other music colleges that happens, and you haven't actually sent it during the application process. So they can see it and kind of tell you whether they feel like they can meet your needs, which is, I think, is really great. And also having an ECHP means that you are guaranteed a spot in the next stage, like the callbacks, not the audition, but the callbacks. So that can give you a bit of extra confidence. So if you feel like, oh, this form is exhausting me, you don't really need to stress it out too much because you're going to get a callback anyway. And that's where you're going to really impress, to be honest with you. I'd say all other colleges weren't as informed about additional needs at all. They weren't hostile, like they just weren't as informed. They didn't have questions about it on their forms, for example, and it just wasn't great. However, ELAM in particular, which is essentially BRIT but up in East London and does focus a lot more on like R&B, were really, really great. They were so good. Like you could contact them. I had a friend, visually impaired, also applying for all the music colleges. She contacted them and they had a phone call and actually in-person meetups to help her fill in the form because it was just too lengthy to do on her own. And they were super accommodating and super helpful. And that was, for me, was actually one of the things that was like, so like, oh my God, they were so lovely to me. And I wish I took that place because I got in there as well. But I just felt like the musical education I was going to get at BRIT would just be a bit more catered to my classical composition. And I would say, like, if you're applying to just normal, like, colleges, like FE colleges around you, I think that's so, like, individual because each one's a bit different. And it's like, that's going to be something that you're going to have to talk about with that college, if you get what I mean.
Cool. Yeah, no, and that's great. It's really good to hear as well that they've got the kind of almost like an automatic callback process if they feel like you're meeting most of the criteria. I guess that's something that's quite similar to what you see in the world of employment as well. Quite often, if you're applying for a job and you demonstrate that you meet most of the criteria, it's quite often you would kind of automatically get an interview to be able to build on your application if you're disabled. So yeah, it's great to see that that's kind of filtering down to the world of education as well. So you've shared some advice already. Is there any other advice for young people who are visually impaired who might be planning to apply for BRIT?
Oh, I just say, like, give it a go. Just try your best and, like, be positive about it. Because I promise you, it's so worth it. Like the happiness I felt once I knew I got into both schools on the same day, and I felt so amazing. Just try, because a lot of the time people feel like, oh, like I'm not gonna get a call back, I'm not gonna get an audition, it won't go well, things like that. But trust me, like Brit is such a lovely place. Just give it a go, like, and just try your best. But make sure that you have that support behind you, helping you, whether that is like an organization like Sound Without Sight or like RIB, like whether it's something like that, or it's your family, your friends, or teachers. Have someone there supporting you, helping you, because it is exhausting.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So I think we'll talk a little bit now about the audition process because that's something that is quite unique, I guess, to music colleges and conservatoires. It's a position that a lot of people who want to do music as a career or in higher education will have to go through.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess from your experience at BRIT, it'd be great to hear a bit more about that. I guess what pieces did you play, and do they prescribe those or not?
I would say no. Me and my mum were like hunting to try and find like sort of grade standard, what they like, what they favor. You can't find anything. On the open day, I talked to a boy that also got in for piano, and he said that he played some grade five piece. So I was thinking, okay, cool. I want to aim grade five and above. And I was like, that's calm. I'm comfortable here in that space. That's great. I'm going to be chill. So I suggested to my piano teacher to do a variation of Autumn Leaves, and I'd kind of like do some jazzy style improv. He said no. And he said that I should do something that demonstrates my ability as a pianist. So for my audition, I did Prelude and Fugue in B flat major by Bach, which was on that year's grade eight syllabus, I'm pretty sure, maybe last year's, I can't remember. And then I did one of my own compositions. In the callbacks, you get an option to submit two pieces as well. And
Mm.
I submitted The Minute Waltz by Chopin, and I also submitted another one of my compositions. And in terms of the composition, they say that they don't factor it in terms of like they don't count it to anything. They do. I'm telling you, they do. They say they don't, they do. Because when I started playing my composition, like all the teachers' faces went from like being all like straight to like, whoa. And then also one of the teachers commented on my composition. So it's like they say they don't care, but they do. Like I'm telling you, if you have any composition, by the way, the composition I played was so simple. It was like just something that I really loved. It honestly, don't think about it as like a classical form of like composition. It was more of a song, honestly. It could have just been an instrumental song track. Okay, compared to any of my other stuff. It
Mm.
was so relaxed, just something that I felt like matched the vibe of Brit. It was very chill, maybe a couple arpeggios here and there, so relaxed. And they loved it. And I just felt like, you know, if you do have a song or anything that you're working on, please share it because they really do appreciate it. And it just shows that, especially if you do it in like a sort of nonchalant way. So I was trying so hard in the audition not to stress out. And I was like, okay, I'm going to play so I played my Bach and, I've been stressing about that for like a month, and that's done. It's over. Let me play my comp now. I'm going to be nonchalant about it. And I fake messed up at the beginning, which I'm not recommending, but I'm just saying it does set the vibe because I didn't think there was a pedal at the keyboard. So I was like, oh, like, do you guys have a pedal? And I restarted then with pedal. And I just like, yeah, just keep it as chill as possible. Like, think about it like, oh, I'm just a musician and I'm just saying some of my stuff, but I'm so confident that I'm amazing that it's just a little piece. Like it's not big deal either way, even if you don't feel that inside, because I definitely didn't. But like, just give that energy and they'll love it. I'm telling you for a fact.
Yeah, I think that is good advice, all of that, especially, confidence being key. And even if stuff goes wrong, I guess having the ability and confidence just to kind of style it out a little bit.
Yeah.
And I guess it's quite hard to learn that, but I guess it does come with practice and performing
Mhm.
to yourself, performing to family members, and all those kinds of things. So the performance is one part of it. Am I right in thinking there is a kind of interview part of the audition as well?
Yeah, there
Yeah.
is.
So what kind of stuff did they ask?
So they actually provide you with the questions during the callbacks portion of like the application process. So you can prepare notes for this and you're actually allowed to bring the notes into the interview. And the questions sort of revolved around back again with these BRIT School values, are you creative? Are you kind? Are you inclusive? Give me examples of this musically. When have you done this in a musical setting? I remember that being his one exact question. They'll also just ask questions about your musical experience, about your musical icons. Who do you love to listen to? They'll ask for reference letters as well, which I think is something that's so important. It's optional, again, like most of the things, but please do it, especially if you've got really good reference letters from your teachers. And especially if you don't have a grade, because I haven't taken any grades, but your teachers can give your grade standard, and that can be really important. Obviously, Brit is a very like chill, open space and a place, but I'm telling you, like the higher your grade standard, I feel like, there are people there with lower and higher grade standards. Like it's okay either way, but if you're sitting at a really comfortable grade 8 standard, you're going to feel great and it's going to be great, and so like having that sort of vibe like around you is going to feel really great. So yeah, like honestly though, everyone's experience is so different because like there are lots of different teachers in the music department, so each teacher's got a different style. Some of them are like cold face, some of them are really smiley, so it just depends who you get.
So when it comes to the audition, can you think of any examples of reasonable adjustments that might be relevant to our listeners?
I would say that they will honestly do anything to make it more comfortable and an easier process for you. So, for example, for me, with my albinism, my visual impairment, and my photophobia, I needed the lighting to be really, really dim. And honestly, like a little lamp on the keyboard is like my preferred setup, which they do accommodate perfectly. And they did for the audition as well. And it's just little things like that. Also, I know other people that needed to come in and out of their interview to just calm down and just have a minute for themselves. Some people need to bring someone in to their interview, and that's totally fine as well. I did mine on my own for some of it. My mum came in at the end for some of it because my interview ended up being 2 hours. So it was very long. So it honestly just depends. It really does depend. But I would just say ask. Don't feel scared to ask. Don't feel scared to declare. I feel like Brit is such a warm and welcoming and like inviting place. There's no need to feel scared to do that. Honestly, it's crazy. You just don't need to. And like anyone can meet, like anyone with additional needs. So even if you don't have an ECHP, so if you're like neurodivergent or if you do have a disability, like you can meet with the Senko and like they can talk to you beforehand, like in terms of the audition. And in terms of my case, she did sit in like the interview portion of my audition, which was nice to just have a nice familiar face, and also was really good. It just feels so much less intimidating because you're always scared with the teachers, like they're going to be totally cold faced, you're not going to know what they think. But obviously when you've got someone a bit warmer, like outside of that process, like can just make you feel a bit more calm, especially if you can't have your parent in with you. And I just feel like just ask, because even like when I was waiting outside, I did get really, really anxious, and I was getting really, really stressed. And like when I get stressed, my nystagmus gets a lot worse. Subsequently, my vision gets a lot worse. And sometimes my vision can like dramatically deteriorate in short periods of time due to that stress because of my nystagmus. So just asking for little breaks. I did ask for a rest break, just a quick little, just a little cool down, essentially. So they're honestly open to anything.
Yeah, I totally understand the variability. So I have nystagmus as well. So yeah, hear you loud and clear on that one. So yeah, I think what you're talking about, that kind of self-advocacy, is really important at any educational establishment you might be applying to, not just BRIT. And I think actually any college or university does have a duty to make reasonable adjustments. I guess some might be more open or more accustomed to doing that than others, but it's always
Mhm.
worth being able to have an idea of what your access requirements are and communicate those because, yeah, that's the best chance of getting your needs met. Were there any written parts of the audition?
Sadly, yes, there was. Luckily, it was on Macs though, so like you're on the computer, obviously. I know that the computers at school they do have screen reader options because it was offered to me at times at BRIT. Just before I took the test, a teacher came in to check that everything was okay and accessible for me to do it. Luckily for me, all I needed to do was like enlarge it a bit, zoom it up, and it was fine. It's basically like a lot about listening. It's like I would say GCSE levels, listening, basic rhythm, basic theory. Yeah, it's very chill. But obviously, like if there is accessibility things about it, because they don't declare it, and this is the issue, there's a lot of parts of the audition process they don't actually tell you about. So, for example, when you get the callback, you have a week to submit 2 pieces. So if you don't already have 2 pieces ready, hence why to use a composition, because I didn't have 2 classical pieces that I could show. So I needed a composition. And then I had one, I worked it up a bit, I submitted it. But if you don't have 2 classical pieces or 2 compositions to submit, you're kind of screwed there because you've only got a week. And they kind of do that on purpose to kind of test you. So that's something that they don't tell you about, which could have been an issue. And they don't tell you about the theory test. They don't tell you at all. So that can be an issue. But like just if they know you have additional needs or visual impairment or any other needs, they will like ask you just before you take the test and you can talk to them about it. They do the tests in like slots, so you can just wait and be in the next slot. I was offered that as an option. So there's lots of ways around it. But yeah, just don't worry about it too much.
Cool. Well, I think that is quite comforting. Like, although there is a lot involved in the application and the audition process, each one of those components, each one of those elements is totally manageable. And it sounds
Yeah.
like Brit are quite open to listening
Mhm.
to your access requirements and making those reasonable adjustments. So that's great. So now that you're at Brit, I guess we can talk a little bit about managing access now that you started. I guess if we begin with like what's been like the biggest challenge, and then we'll talk about solutions in a little bit.
Mhm. So I would say like there's lots of challenges. Obviously, you're moving from secondary to sixth form, which is such a big shift. And for me, I was homeschooled for like 2 years. I was at secondary for a bit, dropped out, was homeschooled. Hence, I could focus loads on music. But yeah, so like for me, it was like big, really big thing. So I was going back to school again. But I think like the main struggle from an access point of view for me was getting around the building. It's a really confusing building. You've got a new build, you've got an old build. Now, the old build, luckily for any music students, you're not in it ever, literally like ever. So that's a relief because the old build is really inaccessible. It's terrible, honestly, because it's like a very old school. But the new build, which is the music building, is really accessible and in theory should be quick and easy to learn, but like they were so busy and stressed. I was promised loads of guides and tours and all of this, and I didn't get that. And so I was left really confused and stressed about how to get to my classes. The timetable's all over the place, and you would think that, oh, it's a music class, we're going to all go together. You're not. You're really not. They split you up into 3 different classes all the time. So even if you think, oh, we're going to all stick together, you're not going to stick together and you're going to be in a totally different class to your friends. And so I really struggled with that because a lot of the time I was late and I felt too awkward to explain in front of everyone. I didn't tell anyone for literally like a month because not because I didn't want to, but it never came up. No one ever asks you. And it's like, honestly, even once you do tell them, no one really cares. And not in like a negative way, like, oh, they don't care. Like, it's just, they don't care. Like, they care about the music. As long as you can play your parts, they don't care. So, it's kind of like that caused a lot of stress for me. And it was just like, oh, like it kind of just, oh, it irked me a little bit. Also, getting work to be presented in an accessible format. Luckily, there isn't much reading music except in theory class. Theory class is a big struggle, I'll be honest. But other than that, we don't read music often at all. So that is like a big weight off. There's not that much written work, and they are able to be flexible. So, for example, I submit a lot of my work as like little video presentations and voice notes, and you can do that, and they're okay with that. But in terms of them presenting their work to you, it's PowerPoints, and they're all up on Google Classroom, so called. But a lot of the time they'll be late. Just like I feel like you likely might have had this experience at secondary school where they're not, even if they do have the work and it is accessible, it's so delayed that you're not at the same place as your classmates, and it's just not fair. And I would say that BRIT is just like any other place, sadly. And that is something that you will have to deal with, and you have to sort of discuss with the Senko, your QTVI, your BI teacher, or whatever, what is going on with that, because it's so difficult to navigate and so hard, especially in a place like BRIT, because I felt like even if you could like say, hey, this is not okay, politics wise, you don't want to, because, these are your teachers, these are the people giving you your grades back. And also with how BRIT works, you want your teachers to like you, put it this way, they are going to be the people giving you opportunities inside school. You want them to like you. And so having to go to them like, hey, you're not presenting the work right, and now I can't even engage in class. It doesn't give a great vibe. Even teachers I've been really close with, I've said to them, hey, you need to turn the lights off on my lesson, or I can't be in this class. And they take it personally. They really do. And so you've got to always be managing that. And that can be really, really difficult. So I'd say that those were my two main challenges.
Yeah, I guess it's all part of kind of training and honing your own self-advocacy and knowing
Yeah.
the most effective ways of asking for that support. And it's great that you can call on the support from Senko and your QTVI and, any family as well. So I guess how have you kind of overcome those kind of initial areas of friction?
So, I mean, at the beginning, it was really difficult. So me and my mum decided before we started that like I was going to deal with the majority of the access stuff, because she had done it for me during school. And she's like, you're getting older, you're going to have to do it at uni, you might as well do it now. I was like, sure, fine. I didn't think it'd be that hard. So I was dealing with most of it with my BI teacher and the Senko, which was okay, I'll be honest. But I did get some external help from, I don't know what it's called exactly, but TPT, like advocacy, just
Yeah.
some extra advice. In the end, I didn't have them do anything for me, but I just wanted my confidence built, and just for the school to know, like, hey, what you're doing is really not okay. I'm having to contact people outside of school to sort of help me, because it's just not okay. And that really did help them to sort of boost. And like the guy that I was talking to from TPT sent a lot of emails on my behalf, and that really did help them get things going. We found that having good communication with the Senko worked the best. So yeah, it's kind of, it's all about communication. It's just, I feel like sometimes, especially when it's music and it's your passion, or even if your passion is theatre or anything else, it hurts more than if it's, geography. It always does. It feels like, hey, why am I behind because they're not doing my stuff? And I remember one time I actually broke down crying, because I was like, this isn't fair. Like, I know it's not fair. Every time, like with my music stuff, it's not been fair. I've auditioned, I've got a place here. It's not fair. Why are you letting me engage in my lesson? Like, it's not fair. And it's just like that, there can be a lot of big feelings there, and like that's so understandable. And that's something that I found so hard at BRIT, because it's all about being really, really happy. And of course I was delighted I'm at BRIT, but like, also it was hard with the BI stuff. But just know, like, to yourself, it's okay to have those feelings, and don't ever let anyone make you feel like you can't have those feelings. But also know that it will get better. So like all of this stuff for me at BRIT got better within 6 weeks, but that 6 weeks was the longest 6 weeks of my life, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, and I guess going into it, you might have had some preconceptions about what might have been difficult.
Yeah.
Was there actually anything that turned out to be easier than you thought it might be?
So my journey was so much easier. I think that, most people will have like a habilitation person that they will likely, like test the journey with, or they might do with their mum or like their BI teacher, it depends. But for me, I had a habilitation person. And so we went around, we did the journey, and I did it a lot of times with my mum. And I was super anxious about the journey. It's like an hour and a half away from my home. So it's a really long journey, and it's also, I wanted to test all the different routes, because the buses are not reliable. I'll tell you that right now. I've now gotten to a point where like I'm so comfortable with travel in general. Like before I was so anxious about it, but I can go up and down central London. I'm totally fine to ask for help as well, which is something so important that you just need to learn as well, asking for help, because, you know, for me, my biggest challenge is crossing roads, and that makes me really stressed and scared. And what I used to do is when I had a really difficult road to cross, I'd call my mum, but she's not there in a way, and although it can help you calm down emotionally, you need someone there to help you. So what I then started doing, especially in the nighttime, because how my vision works, it gets a lot worse in the nighttime. So I actually asked someone, I was like, hey, I'm visually impaired, can you help me cross the road? And although you could think that's something that's so like, it's such a hard thing to do, to ask for so much help like that and be so vulnerable. Obviously be smart about who you ask, just be smart, be safe, be careful. But it was so good for like me and like my confidence in traveling. And then I just felt so calm instantly. And now I get so many different routes to school depending on which is the quickest, because, extra time in bed is perfect. As well, I would say like the band rooms. So I was really worried. Okay, so although I'd been doing like band gigs and stuff like that, I was mainly used to the classical space. So like that's where you have your teacher, it's very regimented. It's not like really like so open and free. And in the band rooms, we're left in the band room together with other like students for like 3 hours at a time. You sometimes even have longer practicals than 3 hours. So it's a really long time where you don't see teachers at all, to be honest. That can be really hard because your eyes get tired. In the band rooms, the lights do not turn off. They are automatic and they are extremely bright. So it's kind of like that can all be really, really difficult. And it's managing that exhaustion, but also it's managing the kit. So if you're a pianist and you're used to playing pianos and not keyboards, which was me, you've got to learn how to use all the keyboards and the synths extremely quickly, because no one else in the room knows how to use the keyboards and the synths. And you're not going to see a teacher for the whole 3 hours. So who's going to use it? Do you know what I mean? So it's just things like that as well that can be like kind of stressful. But honestly, it's nowhere near as bad as once you start playing, I would say it all calms down. That's how I felt for me, at least. I thought that people would know about my visual impairment and think that I don't deserve to be there as much as them, or I'm not good enough, or things like that. And I did worry a lot. I'm not going to lie. Now people do know I do have to prove myself every time. I'm not going to like sort of dress it up and lie. And I would say that also once anxieties get high, you see people's true colors. It's a band, it's high emotional space. And people might say things about your visual impairment or something else that could be seen as a bit unkind or hurtful because they're really stressed and they're worried about the show, they're worried about the gig. But like the way that I sort of was like managing that and dealing with that is like, I'm going to always try and perform to my best ability. And low key, I always have. So I feel like really calm. And so as long as you're performing really well, then I'm telling you, it's going to be the easiest part. For me, the band room and outside of lesson, sorry if that sounds really bad, just because of like the written work and the PowerPoints are my best times, because you're in your band, you're playing music, that's what you came there to do. And it's like the teachers are really helpful, but also the technicians. Like I beg talk to the technicians, because the technician that works in music, super, super helpful. And he actually went around and sort of added like gibbets to some of the synth controls. So now I've learned all the synths and I can actually use the synths properly, which is super sick. And, we did lots of walkarounds in the space. I always stay in the same band room, which means that I'm used to band room 1. So that means I'm really comfortable there. And you can get those sorts of things done really easily. So it's just like little arrangements like that can make it super easy. And now it's like my second home, honestly. Like band room 1 is like my spot.
That's really, really good to hear. And you touched on there, I guess, people's attitudes and understanding towards your site. How do you feel like that is now? Do you feel like that kind of level of understanding has kind of evolved over time?
I would say that it's because it's a competitive atmosphere. You've got to always see it from like two sides. Like you've got to see it social and like musical. So socially, my friends are amazing, so amazing. They will audio describe. They will like, I always found for me in social situations, I had to kind of pretend that I got the joke, because it'd be like someone showing a funny text or something like that. My friends never make me feel left out in that way. They always read everything. They tell me where they are. They'll text me where they're going to be. They're so helpful. And I have like quite a really big friend group at BRIT. I'm in a friend group of about 20, and I have another friend group of about 7. And so like all of them are so lovely. Like they're so lovely and so helpful. Like so many people being so helpful and aware of my visual impairment is so lovely. My friends are like, wow, they're like such a blessing. They've also helped me navigate around the building. You know, they'll sort of shout for me if they see me in the lunch hall. Yeah, they're just spot on. So socially, I would say it's amazing. Also helping me in terms of, because I used to get really stressed out in terms of getting a seat in class because there's no set seating. That really freaks me out. Now I can just be chill about it. My friends just saved me a seat. I'm chilling, like it's all good. And I think also in terms of that as well, just like a little top tip, just try and be friends with as many people in the Strand and in the year and just in Brit as possible. Because for me, especially if I can't see someone, even if they are their friend, they're not always going to call for you all the time. You know, that's quite a lot. So just like, because for me, it means that like, instead of thinking like, oh, I'm searching for my group, I'm just walking and I always see people that I know. And that means that I can feel really calm and comfortable everywhere. And that's honestly such a blessing. But yeah, so it can be, it's like socially, it's so good. So, so good. You couldn't ask for a better place. Now, in terms of music, that's where it's difficult. I would say that there's lots of factors that play into it. I think that, you know, if you're like a pop pianist, I think you'll be fine because, you know, you're the norm. I think that a lot of the issues that I've found come musically are due to my classical background mixed with the visual impairment. People don't like that I know lots of technical things, you know, and that's when you see it in the classroom. And then when you have a visual impairment, if someone feels threatened or uncomfortable, it can be something that someone will try and use against you. It's not always personal. It can just be stress because people do get so stressed. It's so competitive. You know, I've had friends be like, people that I'm so friendly with outside of the band stuff. The minute we get in the band, they're like, I'm worried you're not going to be able to do it properly. And I'm stressed. You know, sometimes I'll have people come up to me like, do you know your part? You know, stuff like that. And it's like every time you are proving yourself, but I'm telling you, every time after a gig, I like everyone else comes up to me like, oh wow, the keys were sick. The keys were so good. And I'm just like, thank you. Because it's like, you know, you've got to sort of get past that because it's their own judgment and like prejudice against you. But once you do get past it, you'll be fine. It's kind of a tough hurdle. For me, I found it so weird. Like, why are my friends switching up on me? But it's not, it's just they don't understand the visual impairment and they're anxious. But they're still your mates and it's still all going to be okay. But you just got to have that little bit of extra determination, I would say. That sounded negative. It wasn't negative. I love Brit so much. It's just, I don't want to lie. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I just want to be honest.
Thank you so much for sharing about that. Like definitely some challenging themes there. I think despite that stuff, it's so amazing to hear how well you're doing, how much you're thriving in terms of your performing and your composition. Could you give me like an overall summary of what it's like to be at BRIT?
Overall, I would say BRIT is honestly the best thing that's happened to me. It's like made me so motivated to like go for what I want. It's given me such a confidence boost. Like before I was like, oh, I love piano, but you know, am I that good? And now I'm at Brit, I feel like, wow, like everyone's so talented. I'm in such a creative space. I can make music 24/7. I'm studying music. It's like the coolest thing that you can do as someone that's like 16 that loves music. Like you couldn't get anything better. There's so many opportunities. The teaching's great. The people are great. The atmosphere is great. The events that you get to go to are so cool. Like you just honestly, it's honestly been such a like life-changing experience, and I'm so grateful.
Amazing. Well, Precious, thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview. I'm hoping it'll be really useful for people who are, you know, coming up to a similar age, people who need to think about what college they might want to go to and beyond as well. And maybe even younger people as well who are just picking GCSEs and trying to plot their way through life. And I think it's really inspiring how you've really doubled down on your passion and ended up where you are now. And I'm really excited to see where your music goes. And I look forward to hearing all your amazing compositions.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Sound Without Sight podcast. Sound Without Sight is a community-driven online knowledge hub, collating information and resources to support blind and partially sighted musicians and audio engineers to break down access barriers. If you're a visually impaired musician or audio engineer, why not share some solutions you found on our knowledge hub? You can learn more and get involved at soundwithoutsight.org. If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, please consider making a donation to support the project. You can do so at soundwithout.org/donate. The music you're listening to was kindly contributed by community member Mackie Jones of MapleMixProductions.com.